Drag Race Down Under is what I'd like to refer to as extremely loud and incredibly cursed. I mean, here's the thing. It's generally believed among the Drag Race fandom that too much of the show, whether it be the mainstay series or international spin-offs, is never a bad thing. I'm not always inclined to agree, but I understand the sentiment, especially if you just genuinely love seeing a kooky cast of drag queens every couple of months, and you just like to sit back and enjoy some good old-fashioned antics and some cool runways. But Drag Race Down Under, which if you don't know, is one of the most recent international spin-offs of the series with an Australian and New Zealand-based cast, is kind of impossible to do that with. And before the inevitable shitstorm of a finale drops this weekend and leaves several subreddits in a state of disarmed panic, I think we need to break down exactly how we got here. Now, before we get to talking, I first want to acknowledge what we're not going to talk about. As always, the only commentary I am actually qualified to give in any of this is about storytelling, production, and narrative, and man, is there a lot to unpack here. But there's a whole lot more going on with this particular series that I need to address, but I want to be very careful about how I go about it. First things first, I am not going to discuss any complaints about the actual filming of the show, i.e. the small workroom and bizarre editing and audio choices, because despite rumors of what went on during filming, I, at this moment of recording, cannot independently verify how COVID restrictions contributed to the actual making of the series, and I feel like that's an unfair shot to take, although I think those things definitely are a part of the reason the audience is feeling such a disconnect this time around. The second thing I want to be very clear about. We are going to talk about the underlying issues with race this season, and if you haven't been keeping up, I'll of course provide context on all of this later. But I want to make it clear that while I am going to talk about it and what's wrong with it because it would be irresponsible of me not to, I am not going to soapbox about it, for lack of a better term, because I am not a part of the marginalized groups who have been affected by the show's actions, and I do not want to take up space in a conversation by speaking over people from those affected communities. What that means in regards to two particular queens in this cast and the show's handling of their portrayal is that while I am going to talk about what happened, I want to acknowledge that it is not my place to qualify or justify their actions based on any apologies that have been made by those at the center of the controversy. It is not my place to do that, nor would it ever be, and quite frankly, I am not from Australia and I am not Indigenous, so I wouldn't be able to provide the proper historical context to do that anyway. One last note on this, if there are any Indigenous creators who would like to or are speaking about this very serious topic as it relates to the show, please let me know so I can use my platform to amplify those voices, because that is the only responsible thing for me to do in this situation. Now, let's get into it. As I mentioned up top, Drag Race Down Under is just the latest of international spin-offs sashaying into the franchise, and it very clearly borrows elements from other seasons that don't all quite work together. For example, I'd say it's the closest to Drag Race Canada in overall vibe in that it's sillier and a little rough around the edges, but the presence of Ru and Michelle on the judging panel kind of also creates a hostile and high-stakes environment, and both of those things are pretty confusing to the viewer in terms of what we're supposed to take away from each episode. Another thing that I can't really effectively speak on or speak to because, as you can tell, I am not Australian, but I have seen critiques from folks in Australia and New Zealand that the dichotomy of Ru and Michelle working with what I can only assume to be an Australian production company gives up the vibe that the series is trying too hard to be Americanized. Ru and Michelle often don't get the Queen's humor because of stark cultural differences, and instead of admitting to that, they just kind of double down on things that are wrong. For example, they literally call the show Down Under, which is a term that is used for Australia in physical relation to America, and some of the runway themes like Bogan Prom or Finest Sheila in the Bush were very much misinterpreted by the judges panel from what I understand. This is also noticeable in RuPaul's Drag Race UK, where Ru and Michelle are also present and stuff kind of goes over their head there too, but it's even more noticeable here somehow. Alright, so as we've established, the vibes are all off in terms of an overall framing device for the cultural context that the show is presented in, but what about the things that consistently make the show great no matter what season we're talking about? The cast, the challenges, all of that. I've said this before, but I do not think that any cast of Drag Race has been inherently bad, but I do think there's a lot of wasted potential in how they're utilized narratively, especially in these more recent seasons and spin-offs. As I've also said before, every reality TV show narrative is rigged in the sense that the producers have pre-planned decisions for who makes it to the end, but here's the thing that this season in particular has proved to me. 1, the story producers do not know how to adapt, and 2, they're incredibly sloppy when it comes to the beats that they're trying to hit. I guess I'll just start with the treatment of Elektra this season because it's the best way to illustrate what I'm talking about here. From the jump, she was presented as an unpolished and busted and looked down upon for no discernible reasons by the other queens. Sound familiar? Obviously, it is very hard to predict an audience's reception to a cast member before your show actually airs, which is why you, as the producer, have the responsibility of guiding fans to that conclusion that you already came up with. Elektra as a finalist would have been the easiest goddamn home run for this season. It is painful. Seasons 4 and 5 of Drag Race are generally regarded as some of the best, and both seasons have a classic underdog fights to the top blueprint. But for whatever reason, the newer seasons are too afraid to take a chance on that. Elektra was probably cast as the butt of somebody's lame-ass joke and ended up being super charismatic and a great performer. Why not just run with that all the way? It's unexpected and it gives your viewers somebody to root for. But no, we need the unpolished lip-sync assassin box checked off, so back down to the bottom 2 you go, sis. Now let's talk about who they are trying to push to the end here and why it makes no fucking sense. First and foremost, Art Simone's arc on this season is the most bewildering thing I have literally ever seen. I have seen fan fiction constructed better than this shit. This isn't even shade to Art, in all honesty. I think she's very talented and a charismatic performer, and in normal circumstances would have made a solid top 3 contender. But then Snatch Game happens, way too early I may add, but we can chat about that later. And Sis finds herself in the bottom 2. Cool, this is Art's shit or get off the pot moment. Let's see if she can bimini her way back to ruin Michelle's good graces after this. And then Coco Jumbo wins the lip sync fair and square and sends our little sea monster friend back to the lagoon. And to be honest, I didn't hate this. It felt like the show was actually being fair in what was being presented, regardless of whether or not Art and Coco should have been in the bottom to begin with. Coco won. There's no disputing that Coco won. Art has an iconic scorched earth moment backstage, and we all move on. Great. And then episode 4 happens, and would you look at that, I need another drink. So here's the thing. I am usually pretty good at sussing this stuff out, but I actually cannot tell what went wrong here for the life of me. I just know that in my hardest of hearts that this was not the intended plan. Either Art was supposed to be eliminated and then brought back later in a way that actually made narrative sense, and that plan was scrapped and is on a cutting room floor somewhere, or the producers expected Art to beat Coco, they got backed into a corner with how underwhelming she was in the lip sync, and decided to bring her back in order to not have to do as much storyboard rewriting later on. But here's the thing. Art hasn't won a challenge all season, so I'm losing my goddamn mind out here trying to find the narrative logic in a place where I don't think there is any. And I know wins aren't everything, especially if seasons have progressed over the years, but like, come on, dude. This is the first time I've legitimately been stumped by a production decision, and I do not say that lightly. I feel like this season has broken me in that regard. And on top of that, let's also mention the incredibly yikes optics of eliminating one queen of color, then making the remaining cast member of color lip sync against another white queen, win fair and square only to be eliminated, and then the white cast member that she beat comes back with no explanation. Again, I want to stress that this is not Art's fault. This was just one of the many boneheaded decisions that production made this season. And if anyone from this season is watching this by any chance, please write a tell-all when the NDA expires. I will do a live stream reading of it on this channel immediately. Or you can come on here and chat with me anytime. I promise I don't bite. Anyway, let's move on to another finalist, Karen from Finance. Karen's run on the show has been controversial for a couple reasons. She had come under fire for a collection of racist dolls and a tattoo she had a while back, which she claimed she did not know the harmful implications of because it was something that had always been present in the culture at large growing up. She threw away the dolls and got the tattoo removed once she learned the history of their use and has since apologized. And as I stated earlier, it is not my place to make a judgment on whether or not she deserves to be forgiven by the communities that she has actively harmed. That is up to the people from those communities, and inserting my opinion here would be irrelevant and inappropriate. I am just stating what happened here because the context is necessary. The second reason that fans have been lukewarm to her run on the season is, well, she's been pretty middle of the road so far. She won the first challenge and not really in a definitive I'm here sort of way, and then just completely flatline. From what people claim, she's one of those queens that is talented in live performance but doesn't have the skills that necessarily always translate to Drag Race. But this is where it's on the producers to adapt to that instead of throwing somebody a life preserver and hauling them to the finish line whether they can stand in the shallow end or not. And even if you want Karen to come out as a frontrunner, give her a challenge she's good at. She literally says during an episode at one point, give me a scripted acting challenge. That's what I'm good at. And this is not me advocating for rigging. This is me just wondering why the story producers are falling so flat in every way that even the queens are like actively pointing it out during the season as it airs. Alright, I need another drink, god damn it. And now we've arrived to Scarlet Adams. And again, for those who are not in the loop, Scarlet has an extensive record of dressing in blackface and other culturally offensive costumes while performing in drag. That's not a secret, that's not an oops. She admitted to this, and the show handled discussing it extremely badly. Basically, the way it's addressed on the show is that the queens are putting on their makeup and talking about things they've done in their past, and Scarlet brings up that she has done offensive performances in drag, making fun of Black and Indigenous folks. The reason she gives is that she was young, meaning in her early 20s, and that she was just a byproduct of the culture at the time. She gets pushed back a little bit from some other people in the room, and then it's mostly brushed off until it's time for the runway. We'll get to what's wrong with all of this in a second, I promise. Ru then acknowledges the issue outright on stage, Scarlet fesses up, and Ru explains that he could cancel her right then and there, but then in his words says that he would prefer to use it as an opportunity for learning and growing. So let's break this down. In the workroom scene, all of the queens that are having this conversation are white. The two POC queens in the cast are not there when this is brought up, so that's problem number one, especially once again considering the yikes dynamic that the show had already previously established with the Art Simone and Coco Jumbo situation. Just like I keep reiterating that it is not my place to forgive Scarlet for her actions, it is not on any of the other people in the workroom to do this either. And while RuPaul is a person of color, POC are also not a monolith, and the whole "we can move past this because RuPaul said it was okay" thing is wildly inappropriate for reasons that should be obvious. So I have a couple theories here. Theory number one is that Scarlet was intended to be the winner of the season, hence the 3 challenge wins, and that the producers genuinely didn't know about her actions until they were already filming, which is why Ru then confronts her on stage as if this is information he is just learning about for the first time. But I kind of doubt this because I would imagine that casting does extensive background checks on everyone involved, and this is not the kind of controversy that you want for a show you're making. It just isn't. So it could have essentially been a Sherry Pie situation that they figured out after the fact. Theory number 2 was that they casted her with the long-term goal of giving her the "we're so woke, let's address this controversial issue with no nuance, please give me the Emmy" moment, but she wasn't going to be the winner, so it would have been fine. Maybe Karen was supposed to be neck and neck with her the whole time, giving the audience someone to actually root against, but then Karen didn't perform as well as expected. But here's my problem with this theory. It is so easy for this idea to backfire in ways that we probably haven't even conceived of, and I have no idea why any casting producer would willingly take this on if this was something they knew ahead of time. And so this leaves Kita, who I absolutely adore and I have really enjoyed watching since the beginning. But if they crown her, it's almost going to be seen as a default win by the fans because of how badly the show bungled the other narratives of the 3 contestants still at play here. Ultimately, yes, we are still growing and learning, and this is just a TV show. I mess up sometimes, and everything that I've said in this video may not even be perfect. But the important thing is that we all take accountability when we screw up. And this situation is a very big screw up that nobody involved seems to want to take accountability for, and that really sucks. Especially because all of the queens on this season are really talented, and I know folks in Australia were so excited to finally have some representation in the franchise. So I hope Down Under does get a second season because performers in that community deserve a chance to shine. Now this video is already getting really long, so let me just do my rapid fire takes about other things in this season that really pissed me off. Okay. Anita Wiglet should not have been eliminated that early. Kita and Elektra should have had a double win for the branding challenge. Maxi should have won the design challenge. Elektra being in the bottom for the performance challenge was the most ridiculous thing I have ever seen. Snatch Game should never be that early in a season ever again. Reese Nicholson is cool and I like him. The spin-off seasons are really suffering from generalized challenges that just feel like a paint-by-numbered version of the US seasons, and Untouched by the Veronicas is one of the best songs ever made. Okay, enjoy the finale. I'll see you on the other side, and by the other side, I mean whatever All-Star 6 turns out to be. Okay, bye!